All right. Welcome to the Strong Life Coach podcast, where we speak life, coach life, write life, and lead life. Today, I'm joined in the podcast studio with Michael Luna. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. What an introduction.
I'm pumped up. I'm excited. I told you before the show that I was pleasantly surprised and encouraged that you would even accept an opportunity like this.
I know.
I look up to you tremendously. I think about when you and I were peers, we were in a leadership role over in the insurance world. You were somebody who continued to just, I think the phrase that would be accurate to say, you would farm up other leaders, you would farm other trainers, you would just produce them. And I think that I remember you being somebody that you were referred to as the expert of the expert of the experts. And so I think I've learned from you a lot over the years, but I'm excited for us to showcase some of your journey and something that you're incredibly passionate about, which is the failure element in leadership.
Yep.
Okay, so before we continue, I want people to know a little bit about you and your background. So if I have any of this off, you just let me know, and I'll be gracious in being corrected.
Yes.
All right. So you have your bachelor's degree in business administration from West Texas A&M. Almost 10 years in the insurance world.
Yes.
With 6 years in the leadership role. And currently you work with Big Brothers Big Sisters in the nonprofit sector.
Yes.
As an outcomes manager.
That's
right?
correct. You got it all.
And then let me see here. And then one of the unique experiences you have in the leadership role is working through a site closure in Amarillo, where you had 200 people reporting to you.
That's correct.
And helping them figure out their next steps.
Yes, exactly.
Well, awesome. Okay, it's awesome. So I'm glad they know a little bit about who you are and your background. Of course, they'll learn a little bit more as they keep on tuning in. But let's jump on in. So for people who don't know, I sent Michael Luna a Facebook message on Messenger, and I asked him if he'd be willing to be on the podcast, and he graciously accepted. But he had a condition. If you maybe it was a condition, maybe it was something else.
It was stipulation.
Maybe a
I
request.
wanted to play it on hard mode. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
He said he really wanted to talk about failure in the leadership role. Yes. So that's where we're going to start off, the first part of the podcast. So I want people to know I didn't ask him to talk about failure. That's not what I do. I don't lead people to talk about the hard stuff, but I always respect it when people are willing to talk about the not so glamorous part of the journey.
Absolutely.
Because really, we all relate to that. We've all been in a situation where we were not successful or we were not in an ideal spot. And I think it's going to hit a lot of people.
Hope so.
So let's jump on in. So when you think of failures in the leadership position, what comes to mind?
What comes to mind for me is those moments and opportunities where you're like, I'm supposed to be the expert. I'm supposed to be the end all be all, and I messed up. Your shot's off. And I speak too much in sports analogies, and everyone around me absolutely hates it. But it's definitely your shot's off. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. There is an objective. When you're an individual contributor, it's very easy to say, I specifically need to do X, Y, Z to accomplish the task. But when you're given and we both know this because we were both supervisors. When you're given 15 people and you're saying, you do X, Y, Z, you do X, Y, Z, you do X, Y, Z, inevitably someone's not going to do it. So that's what I think about there, where it's like you're losing sleep at night. You're waking up at 2:30 in the morning. You're like, why couldn't this person just do this? Why couldn't they just do that? And that's what I think about.
Yes. I know. I think any leader out there can relate to somebody on their team who doesn't seem to want to be led and doesn't want to be influenced. And it's like, and you can look at your own experience, your own expertise of what you've learned, or you can even look at your own character. You're like, am I modeling a learner spirit? And you're like, wait, I'm modeling it, know, I'm learning from my leader, and that certainly could be a frustration. I know, even from an analytical perspective, I can look at, well, how is my team performing, right? Compared to everybody else. Are we at the average or above the average?
Right.
If we're above the average, I kind of feel safe, I feel like somewhat successful. Well, if we're above the average, we have to be doing something maybe better than the majority of the people,
Yes.
but the definition of average or above average. And I think when my team's not there, I think I could feel like that.
Right.
And you start analyzing everything. You know,
sure.
I remember analyzing. I was going through every single team meeting. Like, what did I do? What did I sacrifice? How much did I pay? Did I pay for meals? You know, even
Right.
But just going through everything that I could potentially think of that could have led to me, you know, for me, people who've tuned in enough know that I went through a layoff, you know, from last year into March of this year of 2019.
Right.
But I relate tremendously to I think feeling the failure in the leadership role.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'd also say with that, it's you look at it and you're like, okay, what is wrong with me? And it's so easy to fall into that trap as a leader when you start taking on the opportunities of your people and you're like, it's me, whenever it maybe their shot's off, you know? And so you're there to help them with that. But if you take it on and you say, oh no, it's all me, you're not helping them, you're not benefiting them, you're not improving their game. You really have to look at what they're doing and how you can help them understand how to fix it.
Yeah. And you're right. In the leadership role, we kind of go like, how many more hours can I put in?
Right.
You know, like if I'm putting in 40, if I put in 44, you know, or if I change something around
on the weekend. And,
right. Let me just put more work in, which makes me a little bit more stressed, which probably makes me a little bit less effective.
Right.
But no, I relate to that 100. So let's go back to that conversation.
Sure.
What motivated you to initiate the failure talk? Like what gave you the motivation to say, let's talk about this topic?
Well, it's not because I'm a masochist. It's more so I think a lot of times it's very easy to talk about all your victories. You know, I had a lot of successes. Like you said, my team was always a talent farm. Whenever I worked in the insurance industry, I was always really good at identifying what made people great and how they could achieve and excel further in that. And I've had a lot of victories. I'm very proud of it. I'm very humbled by the opportunities that I've had. But I think if I look at what gives the most value add for me to talk today would be to talk to not so tenured leaders and say, you will fail, you will make mistakes. There will be times where you don't win the game. And that's okay. You have to learn from it. You have every time that you lose, there's an opportunity to afford yourself a new strength. So I definitely, when you approached me with it, I was like, it'd be really easy for me to talk to you, for an hour about, I did this great. But I think the reality of it, and I think something that people need to identify is there are failures and losses in being a supervisor, being a leader, that you definitely need to find strength in.
Yes. And I think when I hear somebody willing to talk about failure and they're willing to talk about hardship, I think maybe the first thought that comes to mind is courage. You know, like it takes very little courage for me to tell you about what I'm good at, you know? Yeah. Like, that's easy, you know?
Yeah.
You're on a first date, you just need to lead out with your good foot, but the courage to tell you what I'm not so proud about, what I might be even embarrassed about.
For sure.
And, what I think about it is like this communication paradox where I don't want to talk about my weakness, but when I do, and when I choose to do, I find I get stronger. So I get stronger talking about my weakness, or the hardship isn't as huge if I'm willing to share it with other people around me.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, with your strengths, you have your strengths. They're apparent, they're inherent. You're not working on those. But when you can come up and say, here's my opportunity, this is what I'm working on. I'm trying to get better at this. There's a much more resonant, more powerful message there.
Yes. So if we got into the details then for you, what's maybe a specific, failure that you faced that you maybe really had to strive to learn from and grow from? Sure.
So and in anything that I say, I intend no disrespect or devalue of anybody else. I think specifically about an opportunity where I had an employee who just did not want to be there. And I pushed too much. To keep that person successful. I was thinking, financially, that person needs a place. Financially, they're struggling. I need to keep them employed. I know that they're not doing their job. I know they're even falling asleep on the job. Yeah. So, I kept that person employed. And later on, I went into social media and I found that person. I was actually going to add them. I was like, this person was pretty cool. We got along fairly well. And I saw specifically that they had a post where they were making fun of me for that very effort. They were saying, I can't believe that this guy was keeping me on. I wasn't doing my job. And then I had, other former employees like posting in. They're like, yeah, you never did anything. And yeah, you were always asleep on the job. And, I looked at that and it made me think, maybe I need to be tougher. Maybe I need to be more difficult as a leader. Like maybe I need to be more harsh. And I thought through that. I ruminated over it a little bit. And it came down to the fact that I understood that I took care of that person even when they didn't deserve it. They didn't earn it. And I think that that's an important thing to understand as a leader. That defeat, that failure, I learned, I at some point you do have to quit giving to someone. Wow. And I learned definitely that there's a good discernment that you need to have about yourself to understand when a situation is a lost cause, and you still treat that person with respect, and you still treat that person with, a level of human love. But you definitely have to hold them accountable, because if you don't hold them accountable, you're not holding yourself accountable.
That's right. Wow. And I think any leader can relate to the challenge of leading people who don't want the influence, who don't want to follow, right? And who don't want it as bad as you do, right? And if you're a leader who's passionate, who's driven, and who wants to make an impact, then you have this element of like self-motivation, like, hey, I'm gonna hold myself to a high standard. I'm gonna go after it. And I know in my world, I talk about it, in the coaching world right now, it's nice because it's people who want it and who are willing to pay for it. Right. And if they were falling off or something like that, hey, it was no longer a good connection. It could be a very easy and amicable, just, hey, disconnect. All right. Hey, if this isn't working for you, completely fine. Let's go different directions. Right. And that's good and that's easy. But I know some of the corporate roles, it's a very prolonged process in leading somebody. And we talk about coaching them up or coaching them out. Coaching them out can be an incredibly tedious process in the corporate world.
Right. Yeah. And it even makes me think about it. We didn't really talk about it much in the pre-work, but I think about you as an example. When you were an individual contributor in the insurance world, and you were just like fire and flame, like you were just the best of the best of the best. And then you moved into a leadership role, and it was like, okay, well, there's inertia here because these people aren't as, I wouldn't say they're not as motivated, but with I would. You, I'm trying to be too PC. I would say the most diplomatic way I'd put it was they were not at your level. And I felt that way when I became a leader, because I was like, well, you just do the job. Yeah. You don't need to be told to do the job. You just do the job. And then you become a leader and you realize, oh, these people actually have to have motivators. They have to have incentives. You have to find ways. And then sometimes the incentives aren't even going to do the job. Right. So it's difficult when you transition as a leader. And I would say that to young tenured leaders, that you have to understand, just because you're as hardworking and lethal as you are, it doesn't mean your team's going to be.
That's right. And I remember, and there's this naive thought I remember having, thinking, surely everybody wants it as bad as I do, and they're hungry, because I felt hungry. I remember Cassie would give me, when I was an individual contributor, just answering phones on the front line as a customer service rep. She would give me like a sheet, and I'd say, okay, this is the chart, how you're doing, your performance, what you're doing outside of your role, to build your brand. And then, she wanted me to rate myself this every single month when we got together, 1 out of 5. So in every single month, I'm showing up talking about why I'm a 5.
Right.
That's the way I just thought about it. Like
Right.
every month, I'm going to give you a statistical and a subjective perspective
Exactly.
on why I'm a 5.
Right.
And then that's just was normal.
Yeah.
So then I transition into the leadership role, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
let me just give the same worksheet, and then I'm like, hey,
Right.
do y'all want a 5? Like,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, even again, you just think everybody wants it,
Right. Right.
and but yeah, there's this element of, I think, some disappointment.
Yeah.
But then you have great people, you know,
Sure,
and you find out everybody doesn't have to want it.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be nice if everybody
It would
did?
be so great if everybody was on the same page and everybody was a Derek. If we got all Dereks and all Amy Jenkies, we'd be in a great spot.
That is not the message.
Yeah, and I mean,
but
yeah.
I think about it from a drive perspective. Like I think there has to be, and I've learned that there's a sobriety in knowing, okay, I will never be criticized for not giving all my effort.
Right.
I'll be criticized for giving the wrong effort, like
Right.
too much.
Right.
I'll take
Right.
that one every day, but
Yeah,
I won't.
for sure.
I won't take. I cannot be criticized for not.
Yeah. And I don't even understand. I can't conceptualize it. And maybe that's the reason why we were drawn to leadership roles. I can't conceptualize coming in and being like, all right, I'm just going to duck down, keep my head down. Maybe nobody will understand I'm not doing anything, you know? And I've talked to people about that before. I recently had a coworker that was just like, I don't understand why people aren't doing their job. And I'm like, you have to understand that not everybody is motivated like you, you know? And so, you know, I told you about it. I think like 2% of people are just geared towards, I'm just going to do the job regardless. The other 98% as a leader, you have to figure out what motivates them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think I told you in response to that is like, I feel like that 2% that are just naturally driven, they're the one that actually wants additional accountability.
Right.
So, and I found that like with hard work, I think with humility as well, like the most humble people are the people that actively get outside perspective,
Right.
but it's like you need it the least,
Yeah.
but you want it the most.
Right.
And the people who need it the most want it the least. And it's this crazy paradox.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So let's talk about some of the, so you talked about the element in leadership, maybe even you talked about like a direct report, the failure you felt in that element.
Right.
What other challenges did you face that you might call a failure in your leadership journey?
The biggest thing for me, and I would call it a failure if I was looking at it objectively, but I also think that I grew a lot out of it. You know, when we were in the insurance industry, in the service role, I was a rock star. Like
This is true, and he's not bragging. This is a real fact.
Yeah, this is one of the very few moments where I'll say something positive about myself. But you know, everyone came to me. It was like, hey, he's the expert. He's a black belt. Like, you got to go to this guy. And I just was not growing in that role. So I moved from a service role, which takes inbound calls on existing customers, to a sales role. And I took on a brand new team. All of them were brand new to the company. And we went through time and we went through heartache. We had some successes that I'm very proud of. I'm very proud of those people. But ultimately, I had to step away from the role because we had something, I guess, if you're a layman and you're not in the insurance world, compliance is very important. So there's specific things you have to say on the phone. And my team was not being able to achieve that. So there came to a point when I realized I can either fire every one of these 14 people or I can step away from them. And I'm not in the business of firing people. So I told my leader at the time, I said, for the sake of these people, so they can go to other supervisors and maybe have a different look, I need to step away. And I remember he was so gracious in that moment. He was like, well, I think he said something that was profane, but he said,
thank you for keeping my show PG.
Of course. But he said, don't worry about them. What about you? And I was like, I realize that I'll be fine. But if these people get a different supervisor on a different team, they'll have a different type of growth. And, you know, if I step away now, it prevents these people from being fired. And I say that was a defeat, but it also was a success because I remember we had a huddle, for people not aware of how that world works. You have huddles every day. And we were having our huddle. I was going through numbers and my direct manager came up And he told my team, I just want you to know that there are people who are going for promotions that don't work as hard as Michael is stepping away from the role. So if anything, I felt like, whatever, like if I have great numbers, if I have great execution, but to get a compliment on my integrity, that speaks volumes to me.
Yes. And I think there's something powerful, because I think as a goal that you have with integrity is you want people who know you best to respect you the most, and I think about your leader in that spot. I think there was incredible respect he had for you, despite what was happening with your direct reports. So your direct reports weren't performing. Right. And then, but the amount of respect he had for you, I think that speaks volumes about your character.
Thank you.
And yeah, I think it's I know for me, the challenge of it, I found out that I was one of 8, or however many there were, one of 8 supervisors of the 30 or 35 supervisors that was being let go. Right. And I think the analysis of it is like, hold on, like bottom 8, like really? Like, and then I'm going through the stats, I'm going through the efficiency stats or quality stats. And then I'm looking at not just currently, but then the progress we were making, and everything that's happening. Right. And then you're seeing areas, that's a rough area, we could certainly be better in. Sure. But then you're going, I'm just going, hey, I'm not bottom 8 though. Like, where does this come from? But then you also, I remember analyzing every bit of the journey, every meeting. How much money I was putting into some of these meetings to see, like, was I all in? Right. Was I invested? I'm just going, I feel like I was all in now. And then I looked at extracurriculars, like speeches that I was giving outside of my role, and, leadership development program, speeches and presentations. And I'm looking at all of that. I'm going, wait, like, so they're going to pick the guy that was speaking the most in that space. So I think there's this, there's a proverb, I think, that says hope deferred makes the heart sick. I like that. And I felt like a sick heart was like all up in my chest, right? And going through that experience. And so I don't know anybody who wants to get voted off the island. Is the way I felt. Of course. Yeah. And in that situation, and I wouldn't demean the organization at all, because they have to make money. I would constantly get feedback that it's like, yeah, you're the most ethical. You're not stealing any binds from anybody. You're not taking money from anybody. You're here constantly. I was there nonstop, getting like 20,000 steps, just walking with my headset, listening to calls. And even then, like other teams would be like calling me for assistance. And, I gladly gave it. And I was just like, I'm putting in this much effort. And I felt that same way. It's like, how am I not the greatest right now? And especially since, like, in service, I had no problem whatsoever in succeeding. So there's a lot to learn from that. It definitely puts you in a place where you're exposed and you see specifically what your opportunities are. Sure. So tell me about stepping away from Nationwide, stepping away from the insurance. Or I guess it was Nationwide, because you stayed in insurance for a moment. Tell me about stepping away from Nationwide after 9 years. What was challenging about that for you? It was very bizarre, because I always say it. I tell people it all the time. Like, we have our corporate brainwashing. We had our Nationwide, our culture. Everything about the Nationwide culture is just exceptional. So walking away from that, and not to say that, State Farm or Big Brothers Big Sisters had anything to a detriment, but to step away from a language, like it really was a language. You spoke Nationwide, you blue. Going away from that and just trying to figure out who I am outside of it, that took a lot. And, you have this identity, and at Nationwide, I was known, so it was like, yeah, this guy's renowned. Like, we know this guy. And then to just go and be an unknown again was bizarre, very bizarre. It is weird. Like you feel like I have Nationwide DNA. Yes. You know, and I remember recalling, I was like, how many times have I like promoted this brand when that wasn't being paid to,
Right,
like,
right.
and I remember like family members, like after they heard me speak, talk up on Nationwide, they're like, oh,
Right.
you make me want to go get a quote.
Yeah.
Like
Uh-huh.
one of the values is we sell Nationwide and all we do.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I
Yep.
felt like I was living that,
Yeah.
so I was like, hold on, I'm giving these people like this voluntary marketing,
Yes.
through my personal brand.
Right.
And then I'm no longer going to be connected.
Yes.
And then I remember like getting on LinkedIn and like you see like other successes from that are not even connected with me anymore.
Right.
Like the C-suites, the but I just felt like this disconnect, and I might even say there was this sadness
Right.
that was associated with anything successful that Nationwide was doing.
Yes.
I think what was her name? Tori. Do you remember the singer who curly hair?
Oh, I don't.
She's associated with Nationwide.
I kind of know what you mean.
Kelly, who knows?
Who knows?
So she's one of the artists that Nationwide
Yes.
had brought on. But I remember seeing the Nationwide jingle in the commercial,
Yes.
and like there's like this element of pain
Yeah,
that's
I'm not part of the
associated.
team anymore.
Right.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I see that on LinkedIn too. And like, there's specific former coworkers that we have, and they're posting, and they're like, "We had a great day doing this, and we took care of this, and we built bikes for kids." And I'm just like,
You're outside waving.
I'm waiting outside, like my badge
outside the window.
my badge doesn't work. Can somebody let me in? Yeah, for sure. Because like and I think probably that happens with any corporate culture.
Yeah.
Is you really get into it and you start speaking the language, and then when you leave it, like I remember there were times after I had put in my notice, a big thing that I had was the change, the continuous improvement.
Mhm.
And like I was working with people on their projects, and they're like, "Man, you're so good at this. This is so great. What are we going to do next week?" I'm like, "I won't be here." So I'm sorry, you can work with somebody else, but it's not going to be me. So yeah, I mean, I see the reason why so many former employees are like, "Man, I miss being there." I mean, it was a family.
Yep.
So even, and speaking on the whole concept of this about talking about leadership failure, it's like even when you had a misstep, they were like, we'll get you through it.
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, I felt it when I had the site closure. I felt the exact same as you, where I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna, you're getting rid of me, But there were so many other times where it was like, hey, you're having opportunities in this, but we're gonna help you through it.
Yep. And so what is it like talking about it now? I'm curious to like your experience and talking about like some of the nuances that we're talking about now. So I don't know if have you ever talked about like in a way like this?
No, I have not. A lot of my coworkers always ask me about it. They think, a lot of, I guess the people that I work with just came out of college. It's their first real job.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're like, oh, tell me more about that. Like it's wild and profound to them to think about having a job for almost a decade, so talking about it now, I look back on it and I'm like, I don't have any spite in it. I'm so thankful for the opportunities, and if anybody were to ask me, hey, I want to become a business professional, where should I go? I'd be like, Nationwide, it's right across the interstate from SeaWorld. Go check it out. It's
there we
a
go.
great job. Yeah. But it is nostalgic to me. Would I ever go back into it?
Ooh.
I can't say. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I've had that, I guess, daydream where I get a phone call from Julian. Shout out to Julian Alanis. And he's like, hey, we need a supervisor back on the team. Are you up to it? And would I do it? I just can't say.
And you get out the stands, pull it off, put the jersey on.
They keep calling me back. I'm back. I'm Dwight Howard. Change me from 12 to 39. I'm a Laker again.
Yeah, it is I think it's a fascinating journey. I think there's, again, the idea of us talking about it, I know the phrase that comes to my mind, or the word is like cathartic.
Yes.
To talk about it, to laugh about it, even the joke you made about the badge outside the window or waving. I think there's something that's like freeing about you saying it and hearing it and me relating to that very much so.
So would you go back?
No. So
that's a fair answer.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's a part of me that never wants to be. I'm not above. Let me be very clear.
Right.
I always want to be clear that I'm never above, because one, I believe in a higher power that will humble me quickly and be like, oh yeah, all other doors closed but Nationwide.
Welcome to Valero.
but I'll say this: there was a sobriety that I had to come to in asking why. And for me, it was different than you. I know you had tremendous success in service. I was picked 1 out of 8 among 30 or 35 others, which says something.
Yeah.
And then when it came to job fit, and if I'm completely transparent, while I was working with Nationwide, I found myself not only thinking but having conversations with people asking, "What would it take for you to leave Nationwide?"
Right.
And I would have those conversations because I would ask myself that.
Right.
And I knew my answers.
Yeah.
And it was, if I can spend, because of the 99% of great things with Nationwide, the one thing that I would criticize, right? It's not even a big criticism. It's a normal. I think it's a normal criticism, but it's this. I felt like I was trained to be the quarterback and the lineman and the receiver and the running back and the fullback and the defensive end and and the list goes on. Like I was trained to be the kicker. Like every position on the football team is what you're trained to do.
Sure.
But I'm only really great at being a cornerback. That's it. That's the only role I'm like exceptional in.
Right.
And I only get to do that 10% of the time, maybe.
Right.
If we said with the people who actually wanted it, maybe 5% of the time.
Right.
And so when I would have that conversation with people about what would it take for me to leave, I would say I would take 50% less money if I could spend 80 to 90% doing what I'm most passionate about, which is speaking and training and coaching people who wanted it.
Agreed.
Yeah. So there was like this element of, can I step away? I think there's, something I've told people publicly, that even like with lifting this business and having this business elevating, become profitable, it has to be like we have our date. No, our timeline is February 29th. So February 29th, I'll consider the corporate world again. Right. But I don't see myself even looking at the open roles at Nationwide at that time. If it came to that, I'm praying that, hey, this whole podcast and speaking culture thing takes off, and I will never have to consider it. Right. But I don't see myself. And maybe it's pride, but there's I think I would explore every single avenue possible before Nationwide.
I think there's also an aspect of it where it's like, would you go back to high school? It's like that was a time period in my life. I had great times in high school. I'm not going to go back to high school because I'm grown and I've already got my diploma. I don't need to go back. So I think that was there. I think also with it, something that I found was this is so tangential, but finding that I had to move, to be able to be successful was difficult. Because, in Columbus, Ohio, when you tell them, well, I moved from Amarillo to San Antonio, it's like, yeah, that still was in Texas. You haven't moved yet. And I'm like, that's 8 hours away. Like it's a whole different geographical location. Right. And for, them to say, look, dude, for you to move up, you've got to move somewhere. You've got to move to Des Moines. You've got to move to Columbus. And at the time, I was just like, no, I've got a very, very small child. I can't just be moving all the time. So, that's something that in the event that Julian calls me and says, hey, I need a supervisor, I would fully realize the fact that once I got my foot in the door, it would be, okay, where is he going to move? And, I love San Antonio. I've never felt more at home than here in San Antonio. I don't want to leave.
Yes.
Yeah.
So talk about, you said, I know we talked about going back.
Yeah.
So then you were in the customer service supervisor role, mastered it.
Right.
Expert level. You get into the sales role, does not go great with the performing team.
Yep.
Then, so you're transitioning out. Did you ever have the thought of, hey, let me go back to service and get in a leadership role, customer service supervisor? You ever have that thought?
That's a great question. So it was actually asked of me by my managers, and they were like, hey, go, you can go back to service. You can go to finance. You can go do this. And I wouldn't even say that my team was underperforming because they were still making money. They were making good money. I had good agents. It was just that compliance issue. And, you know, me having to day over day, you know, write people up. I was just, bad experience. But when it was asked to me, because they did want to keep me on from a talent perspective, it was like, do you want to just go back to the service role? And I wouldn't say that it was hubris. I wouldn't say that it was pride. Maybe I would. I don't know. There was an aspect of it where I was like, if I just go back into that role, what will people think? I would rather just leave than do that. But not only that, if I looked at myself as a career professional, if I went back to that role, what would I be gaining? I would go right back to that mastery level. I would go right back to having a team and not growing, not becoming anything more. So that just didn't sound like something I wanted to do. And I really wanted to get into the nonprofit world. So
Nice.
It looked like to me, I was like, okay, I'll find a good stopgap. I'll go work for State Farm. If an opportunity comes up that I can work in the nonprofit world, I'm going to jump at the opportunity. But going back into service and having like guys like you be like, hey, can you give me some advice on this? And be like, I've already done this. I don't want to do this again. So yeah, it was a bit of an aspect of I need to grow, so I'm not going back.
Yes. And I think about so one of the things I get to do now is I lead a group of professionals on several times throughout the week, but one of the times is Tuesday mornings from 8 to 9. And we were going through, and we went through this, it was called the law of awareness with personal growth. And the law of awareness, one of the things you have to assess is where are you in your career path, right? And it talks about, are you in the confusion path, which is you don't know what you would love to do for your career. So you don't know, and you also don't take steps. So you almost stay confused. And then there's the frustrated path, which is you know what you want to do, but you do nothing about it. So you like see this, you know, this greener pasture, or you see this, what you would love to potentially do, but you do nothing to prepare. And then there's the fulfilled path where you know what you want to do and you're actively working for it.
I like that.
So I think for me, the idea of like going back, I think it would be more, I would be settling for the frustration path,
Right.
where I know what I would love to be doing, which is what I'm doing now.
Right.
But I hope to never be on that path again.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
So we'll see.
We'll see.
So looking back, right? Actually, before I go to the next question, there's an element of what people think about you is such a big one.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And there's this pride that I will feel and sense immediately, and I'll feel it so badly that I'm like, I know I have to be proactive in overcoming this.
Right.
So I'll go. So I think there's two responses that are kind of like when I found out about the layoff. Do I not tell anybody? Or do I tell everybody?
Right.
So I was like, I know which one I feel is more cowardly.
Yes.
And if cowardly is a vice of mine that I try to avoid as much as possible, because I know it never helps me.
Right.
So I was like, man, so I'm going to do this route.
Yeah.
I'm going to actively tell as many people as I can about this is what's happening. But it's interesting because I cared so much what people thought about me. Is I'm not going to have people find out that I'm going through a layoff and then I hit about it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell everybody because I'd rather be a courageous person going through a layoff than a coward going through a layoff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get that.
But there's still so much thought into what do people think about me, and then I'm responding out of that out of that thought process.
Yeah, and that makes me think about whenever I left, I didn't tell anybody.
And I was calling you.
No, you're fine. And for me, like, if I look at that introspectively, I'm like, okay, was I being cowardly? And no, I was just walking away. I was like, what is it going to benefit to tell Derek and Amy and all these people? You know, like, I think, so the day that I mentioned Julian, the day that I left, I was walking out of the building and Julian was like, hey, what's up, Luna? What are you doing? I was like, oh, this is my last day. And he's like, what? And I was just like, I didn't think that it was relevant. You know, I realized that I was a cog in the machine. And, you know, the next day people would come to work, they'd do their job, and that would be it.
Yeah.
So, I remember like the day that I left, I think like 3 or 4 of my employees were there because my manager let me go early. He was just like, you know what, man, you've worked so hard. Go take a rest. And I said bye to them, and I remember the looks on their faces were like, sucks that this happened to this guy. We should have. Because like when I left, the people who were on the floor were some of my best like compliance agents. And so they were never going to get fired. They were going to do great things.
Yeah.
And I remember like they didn't even, so protocol, I don't know if this happened to you, protocol, your manager is supposed to walk you out so that you don't like, I don't know, steal something. Or,
fight somebody on the way.
Push somebody. But my manager was just like, you can just go ahead and, just go, you're fine. And so I remember I just walked out, and like, I think I passed somebody that worked in the restaurant, and they were like, see you tomorrow. And I was like, cool. So I don't think that there was an ordeal of like self-esteem or ego. It was really just, I'm walking away from this.
Yeah.
And
no, I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. I think there's part of me that I wanted it to be somewhat of a emotional transition. I felt like super emotionally connected to people too. Yeah. And I wanted people to know, hey, this is what's happening. And,
right.
Yeah. And I went through like a series of thank yous and all of that. So
right.
Gotcha. So let's see here. All right. So you're looking back. So looking back, Michael Luna, was that 2.5 years ago? 3 years ago?
2 years ago. 2.5. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll say 2.5.
So 2.5 years ago, you are able to talk to Michael Luna then. What advice do you give him going through all that?
I would tell him, don't be afraid to be resilient. Like, understand fully that you have the capability to survive this ordeal. Your team's still doing well. You're just not at the level that you want to be. So don't be afraid to fail. But in the event that, because one of the deciding factors for me, whenever it happened, whenever I left, I got home from work. I had worked probably 12 hours that day. And I went upstairs my son was crying and he needed to be changed. And I was so anxious that I couldn't even pick him up. And I guess, at that time I was like, okay, this is done. Like, I'm way too stressed. So I would tell that Michael Luna, don't be afraid to be resilient, and don't be afraid to walk away and find out what it is that you want to do in your life and do it. And it's going to be the right thing to do.
I like it. Yeah. I like it. Very good. So let's take the transition over.
Sure.
Over to Big Brothers, Big Sisters. Tell me about your role. So you're I am an outcomes manager.
Yeah. So the best way that I can put it is my job is to ensure the success of our matches. So I'm actively surveying the kids as well as the mentors to see how things are going in the relationship, to see where the kid is developing. I'm also working to build activities. We have monthly match anniversary parties where we commemorate the match. And I'm just looking at analytics. I'm looking at all of those surveys and I'm saying, what is it that I see that's happening in these kids' lives, and what can we do to benefit them?
Nice. What would you say is the most rewarding part of your role?
Oh, man. So the part that makes me tear up a little bit is when we have our match anniversary parties and we ask the mentors and the kids about their match, and the kids will share things where it's like, I didn't know that I needed this in my life, and or you have a match that's been together for 9 years, and it's like I'm so proud to have seen her grow up from a little kid to a young adult, and just seeing that, it's just like, that's so rewarding, because it's so important for kids to have an adult in their life that's not their parent or guardian.
Wow.
And so one thing that we monitor is the 40 developmental assets. And these basically say whether or not a kid is going to be successful in life.
It's 48?
40 developmental assets.
40 of them?
There's 40.
Wow. Yeah, I need to get my hands on this list.
Yeah, so we check those. There's things like, reading for pleasure, religious community, service to others. And just having a role model in your life affects 21 of the assets we see.
Whoa.
So you just showing up, talking to a kid, you affect 21.
Dang. Okay, that's going in my notes right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, we're definitely we're benefiting these kids, and you just see it in their lives. And I've seen some of these kids where it's like one of the most difficult things that was a reality check for me, because I understand underprivileged backgrounds, but we have our workplace program where kids meet up with bigs that are part of an organization. They meet once a month. They go to the place of where they work, and for an hour they eat lunch and they do a project. And we had a group of kids come up, and they were like, that was crazy. And I was like, what was crazy? And they're like, the elevator. They had never seen an elevator.
Wow.
And I was just like, that blew me away. And they saw like a projector, and they were like, what is that? Like, these kids are so underprivileged that they've never seen these things. So it's just amazing and so resonant to think about the fact that these kids are getting an opportunity they wouldn't have got otherwise.
Yes, I love that. You're pulling on all of my like intrinsic motivation to impact the world, to change.
So when can we sign you up?
You primed it just perfectly. You said all the good things. You took me through your journey, and it's a perfect time to ask me,
Yeah. You'll be a great big. I'm calling you tomorrow, by the way.
Hey. Well, one, it's nice to be wanted, period.
Yes.
Because I knew you wouldn't ask me if I wasn't somewhat of a decent human being. Because of
and we don't have a lot of bigs over on this side of town. So just to meander in that, we need more people over here. So,
look at you. Look at you. Okay. See, over here, recruiting me. Who would you say was the biggest influence in your leadership journey?
Such an easy question. And I hope that you listen to this, and it's 47 minutes in. So sorry that I am only referencing you up to this point. And sorry you've had to listen to me, because I know that, you've heard my voice enough. But it's definitely Rachel Perez. Or she used to be my leader, and she had the greatest impact on me professionally. When we were at Nationwide and we were in Amarillo, I was a foot out the door. I was like, I'm going to go work at Best Buy. I'm going to go sell TVs. There was a role that I was trying for that I thought I had, and it was a guaranteed sure thing. And then it wasn't. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to take this somewhere else. And, she recognized that I had strengths, and she was like, you should, I don't know if this is necessarily how she brought it up, but she said, you could work for me. So I became a quality assurance analyst, and my leader prior to her, he cared about me. He was able to, be there to fulfill things for me. But when I got to Rachel, it just transcended. It was like, oh my gosh, like she would sit down and she'd ask you, what energizes you as a person? And I'm like, why are you asking me that? I'm just listening to the phone calls. And, she'd be like, what are your strengths? What do you want to be? What do you want to do in this organization? And then she moved to a management role, and she was like, hey, there's a supervisor role. You should take it. And I took it. And then we went through the site closure together, and then we moved to San Antonio. And we went through a lot of different changes. Like we went through that site closure together, and I'm just some random kid. Like I'm not, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, I was about to go work at Best Buy. I don't know. I don't know what to do. And then you have this leader who's well polished, well maintained, cares about people, and it got to a point where when I was in a leadership role and I didn't know what to do, I would just say, what would Rachel do in this situation? And that's what guided me.
Yes.
So she was definitely impactful. Her and her husband are awesome people. I ascribe to be as cool as them. But, I still check in with her. She actually got me onto Big Brothers Big Sisters, because like I reached out to her as my mentor, and I was like, hey, I'm kind of trying to look for another job. And she was like, oh, we have a job here. You want to try to come here? And then seeing her in that role, and she's a big sister as well, and she's fantastic at it. But just seeing her in that role, and then now she's public speaking, and I'm just like, man, I want to be as much of a grown up as you. So yeah, I would say the most impactful person was definitely Rachel. She definitely made me what I am as a career professional today.
Come on.
Yeah.
I love that. I think it's amazing hearing about legacy. and her impact with you, and even the way you describe it, you describe it as vision. Like she helped you to have vision. She helped you to look inwardly, your motivation, your energy.
Right.
She gave you the encouragement to believe in what you can do in your career. And then not only that, I feel like it's one thing to do all of those things, but then to be a door opener too.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
So she's opened to door to quality analyst, and open the door for the supervisor, and then open the door for big brothers, big sisters.
Yes, that's correct.
And so all of those things, I think they are somebody who believes in you, and just continue to add value to you, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I would even say learning to speak on failures. I learned that from her as well. She's very open about the things that she had opportunities in. So, when you have a role model that can actually say, hey, I'm not perfect. Here's the things that I have not achieved. That's just so big. So you're like, oh, you're a human being too.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you speak on legacy, like me being at Big Brothers Big Sisters right now, I would say 80% of the purpose there is to uphold her legacy as a person there. So so I definitely say that. And I still reach out to her. I'm like, hey, I've got this going on. I've got this going on. And it's just important to have that mentor. So like, even I feel like I'm fulfilling the purpose that she fulfilled for me because I have people reaching out to me. You asked me to do this podcast.
Yes.
I have a friend that's asking me to speak to her students. And then I just have people that are like, hey, can you help me with my resume? Can you help me with interview skills? And I'm like, sure, that's what Rachel would do.
Yeah, there we go.
I've got it. No problem.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And again, like when you're listening in, I think that that's the great principle is who can you be that for somebody, right? Who can you believe in? Who can you energize? Who can you help them to understand themselves, their strengths, what energizes them? And then if you're in the role and you've added value to them, like what doors can you open for other people?
Right.
And I think it's crazy the amount. I mean, she has engraved an impact into your life,
right?
For a life,
right.
Which is like it's mind blowing to consider. But then you think about these things that she's done, like they're replicable,
right?
Like
exactly,
anybody could do that. And
for sure. So. Yeah, and something that's very important for young leaders to understand is never forget that somebody's watching. Like you think that you're coming into work, you're having a bad day, you spilled coffee on your shirt, you still have to present that leadership role because somebody's watching and somebody's learning how to be because they're watching you.
Indeed, my friend. Well, we talked about some great content already. I know we're going to bring it in for a landing, but before we close, I want to ask you, tell me about your son, Adam.
Yes.
What is your favorite quality about him?
So I've used the word already, but I'll use it again. I love that my son demonstrates the resiliency that I have. I told you the story, and I'll kind of explain it here as well. This year, my son had very dramatic seizures a couple times. And one time when it happened, I was at work. My GPS wasn't working, so it took me on all these weird back roads. And I'm just thinking, my son is so far away from me, I got to get to the hospital. And then I have a car accident.
Oh, no.
I get hit, rear-ended, and the guy's like, here, I'll just give you some cash. And me being an insurance guy, I'm like, no, we report this to the police because it's the right thing to do. So I get to the hospital finally because my son lives in Austin. I get in there, nobody knows how to tell me where to go to pediatric ICU. Like I walk up to the front desk and I say, where's pediatric ICU? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And I think it's a joke. And it's not a joke. I'm like, oh, wait, hold on. You work here. You're the gatekeeper. You don't know where this is. So I wander all over the place. Finally, I find it. And they don't know who I am. And so I'm standing outside the door of my son's operating room. And I just hear him screaming and I can't do anything.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm just crying because I'm like, is he dying? Like, what's happening?
Right.
And I get in there and I found out the reason why he was screaming was he was trying to pull out his breathing tube so that he could get up and walk. So I get in there and he's just like, hey, Dad, what's up? And I'm just like, you are the strongest child ever and you will be victorious in life.
Yes.
And so, he's resilient. He runs just as much as me. He has just as much of a sarcastic attitude as me. But it's definitely a good thing to be able to look at him and say, you're going to be a future leader of the world.
Come on, baby.
Yeah.
Come on, baby. Resilient, future leader of the world.
Yes.
I love that. I love hearing about you, and I love hearing about your son and everything you see and about him that's going to make him successful.
Yes, and hopefully I won't mess it up.
Well, the good thing about resilience is even if you do, then he's going to overcome anyway.
I'm hoping to affect his 40 assets. I'm hoping to help him out with that. But he's going to be strong, and I love him to death. He's the best thing about this life.
Come on now. Well, good. Well, if you're listening in, I'm here with Michael Luna, and we're talking about failure in the leadership journey. This is the Strong Life Coach podcast, where we speak life, coach life, write life, and lead life. And also do us a favor, go ahead and like the podcast, give it that 5-star rating on iTunes, comment, share it, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you.